Monday, CBS News Philadelphia will be marking 60 years since Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. delivered a speech heard around the world.
All week, we're sharing stories of people who were at the March on Washington, although not all of them saw that speech. Here's Vic Carter in Baltimore.
This has been one of the great days of America, and I think this march will go down as one of the greatest, if not the greatest, demonstrations for freedom and human dignity ever held in the United States.
It was August 28, 1963, when Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. delivered his most iconic I Have a Dream speech. It was the culmination of a long journey for those who traveled by car and rail, planes, and even on foot, from across America to witness and become a part of history. Among those there in the crowd, two young Baltimore men who had worked for years for civil rights in the city before the March on Washington. Professor Larry Gibson and Reverend Douglas Sands have participated in sit-ins at lunch counters and restaurants and movie theaters in Baltimore where black customers were denied service. In fact, before the March on Washington, 400 young black Baltimore women packed the jails and refused to leave. Their bold demonstration and sacrifice led to the desegregation of a movie theater. Their actions chronicled in this display in the Student Center at Morgan State University. Dr. King was aware of their efforts, so Gibson and Sands had to be there on that August day.
What I remember is walking along with a group of mainly union leaders. The immediate vicinity was about 50% black and white. That was a surprise to me. And getting up at the Lincoln Memorial, that's where the stage was set.
Being in the presence and being able to see so many of the people who had become aligned with and associated with the movement. So it was a day of great joy and hopefulness. New hopefulness awakened for all of us involved in the civil rights movement.
When you looked into the eyes of the people who were there, what did you see in them?
I saw some of those people I think changed. I think people that we have a group of people in our society today who 60 years ago came to a change of heart during that particular meeting we had in Washington, D.C.
How do we preserve the image and the sounds and the meaning behind what took place that day?
There's a good historical record that is accessible to people. It may not carry with it the same depth of feeling that those of us who were directly involved in the movement at that time had coming along at this time of contrast. Also, I believe that many more of the present generation who are growing up are trying to find much more evidence about how it happened, what it was like.
The speakers there range from actors and entertainers to a young John Lewis to Dr. King himself. Full disclosure, Professor Gibson left the site early and went back to campus at Howard University, missing Dr. King's speech.
So I listened to some of the early speeches and John's speech, and then there were a few more speeches I knew were coming, but I went home. Well, I went back up to the campus of Howard University.
So you left before Martin Luther King even
yes,
spoke?
That's right. I did not hear the I Have a Dream speech in person, although I was at the March on Washington. I mean, no one had told me that the man was going to give the most famous civil rights speech in the history of America. I would have stayed a little longer.
Do you regret missing that speech?
Of course, of course. I mean, sometimes I give people the whole story. Yes, I was at the March on Washington, and sometimes I fess up. Yeah, I was there and I marched, but I didn't hear the speech in person.
In Baltimore, I'm Vic Carter.
And Monday night at 7, Yuki Washington will host an hour-long special, Still Marching, on CBS Philadelphia. It will be held 60 years to the day that Dr. King delivered the I Have a Dream speech. And if you're watching our streaming channel, CBS News Philadelphia, you can watch the special early. You can catch it on Friday and throughout the weekend.